107.5 WGCI, the Shi's #1 for hip-hop and R&B. It's the morning show with the Destin legend, Leon Rogers, the beautiful Kendra G, the shortest damn man in Chicago, myself, Kyle. And today we have a guest in the studio, a friend to the show. We love her so much. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx.
Kim Foxx in the building.
How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. Can we get the weight loss plan? Because, girl, you looking thin.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I want to take our picture, too. I want to see the progression in time.
What did you do? You do anything in particular?
You know what? I started doing more cardio. I got me one of those Peloton bikes, and I hit the bike every morning.
Baller alert. Baller alert.
It's finance.
Yeah,
it's
seen
layaway at home. Yeah.
Cause I seen that commercial, and I went and Googled it. I was like, oh, hell no.
It's an at-home layaway.
All right.
Kim Foxx is here. One of the things I love about you, Kim, is the fact that we see you out and about in the city. You know what I mean? I think it's important for our city officials to be tangible. You know what I mean? People that we see are taking part. I just literally ran into you last week when the NFL kickoff was taking place down in Grant Park, and it's always good to see you. You always have a smile on your face and a positive word. So, number one, that's great, and we appreciate that about you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be around our people.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about it, man. You know, we're talking about the new law that's going to go into place, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, and we know that you're very active in making sure that translates into some positive things for our community as well.
That's right. So as marijuana becomes legal in Illinois January 1st, January 1st. I have to keep reminding folks of that because you'll smell things in the air and you like, it's still September. We wanted to make sure that now as marijuana becomes legal and it is going to be a billion-dollar industry, that the people who have been impacted by the war on drugs were able to, one, get their lives back. And so our office pledged that we would be working to vacate the convictions of those who were convicted of marijuana possession as far back as we can go, so decades old. So we're looking at the potential of, hundreds of thousands of records that are impacted overall, and we're going to start with tens of thousands of records here in Cook County to vacate the record, which means it's as though the conviction never happened.
Well, what about the people that currently might be in jail right now? Will they get out?
Depending on if it falls under those parameters, yes. And so we're actively working with this partner called Code for America, who will identify all of those folks, generate the paperwork and documentation for us. No one has to pay anything. So if you usually get a record expunged, you have to pay a fee, you have to pay something, you have to show up someplace. You don't have to do anything. We're going to get those names. We're going to go into court, and we're going to ask on your behalf.
Are there any concerns about the technology is that the technology that they're using? I think they started in like California, some with 10,000 people get processed. Are there any concerns with that technology? Because it is, at the end of the day, it's data that has to be processed by a machine. Are there any concerns that they might let somebody out that did more than just sell weed?
Yeah, I mean, so the technology identifies who those folks are, and then they bring them to the state's attorney's office. So there's a secondary process where we'll make sure. But if you think about the hundreds of thousands of records, if we had to do that manually, if we had to do that, just think about how slow the court processes work. So Code for America, putting the algorithm in, they can just find the statute code, right? Like, what is the code for possession of marijuana? Draw all of them down. How many of those folks are in Cook County? Draw all of those down. Nice. And then give that to us. They print the forms. Now, if you go to a courthouse and you sometimes got to do in triplicate and carbon and none of that. They do all the work for us, and then the state's attorney goes into court and says, we want this conviction vacated.
If I'm somebody who has a family member or somebody that's been affected by marijuana and arrested and doing time and things of that nature, do I have to wait for Cook County to let me know what's going on, or can I reach out and say, hey, my cousin so-and-so is locked up, will this help them get out?
Yeah, we got a lot of people calling on their cousins' behalf. We got a lot of cousins. They can call. What I'm telling people is, give us a few months because no one has to do anything. You don't have to actively do anything. What we're going to be doing and where we'll need all of you is alerting people that it's coming, that it's happening. Because you get a letter in the mail, Leon, saying, hey, the state's attorney says your record is gone. My guess is you might not believe that.
No, I wouldn't. till I see it, I have to see the computer, have to see you hit delete.
And so, we know that's, it's an odd thing to happen. I want to say that it's monumental. You're not going to find places anywhere in the country where before the law changed. In California, the law had changed, and then they were vacating records. What we were saying, before this law even changed, let's put this mechanism in place. And so we're going to need folks like yourselves to go out and tell people that this is legitimate. I want people to be able to get jobs. I want people to get housing. Where we find the most incidents of violence in our neighborhoods, we have the lowest or highest unemployment rates. We have the highest concentration of people with convictions. So this is a public safety issue too. It's an issue about making it right, but people who can get jobs, people who can get an education, people who are not held back from their convictions are less likely to engage in violent behavior.
So on January 1st, when it does become legal, now how does that work? Can you still buy weed from your weed man? Or you got to go to Target now to get weed? Like, how does it work when it's legal? Where can you, like, I'm not sure, like, where do you go to get the legal weed beginning January 1st?
So there, right now, is a process where people, again, where it's going to be a big industry, are getting licenses, whether to be a dispensary, whether to be a cultivator. So there will be places that pop up, like we saw the hookah lounges back in the few years ago starting to pop up. You'll start to see that. It will be legal to possess 30 grams or less, right? And so I don't know how much your folks carry on them when they're conducting a transaction. Not your folks. I'm talking about my cousin. Your cousin.
Yeah, talking about my cousin.
So many of them. So they can possess that amount. Right. But what we want to be able to do as this market opens up is to be able for those entrepreneurs right now to be able to participate legally. And the jobs that come with this, we're not talking just about the top ownership. They're going to be people who do transportation, who do transport, who do grow houses. And we want to make sure that communities that have been impacted by over incarceration related to these arrests are able to participate.
And I think that's my biggest question that I have. Yeah. They're going to let us in? Because I know how that goes sometimes, and I know a couple of guys who've been studying and doing their research, preparing for this to happen, but they say some of the fees that you have to pay in order to even get a license are absolutely ridiculous.
Expensive.
That's right. And one of the things that we saw, and I give credit to Jahan Gordon Booth, who is a state representative out of Peoria, who was driving this legislation, was learning the lessons from other jurisdictions, right? So we were the 10th state to do this, and it was where you saw everywhere else, people and communities that have been impacted didn't have a chance to get in. And so they've created what they've called the justice, equity, and opportunity provisions of this, where they give certain percentage points to people who come from impacted communities. So African-American communities on the South and West sides, that you have a higher opportunity to get into the game if you are incorporating people who have been impacted.
I love it.
And so that's because we've learned the lessons. If you let the market play out the way it plays out, it is prohibitive to communities of color, particularly Black communities, because we don't have the money set aside for that. They have actively put in this bill provisions that will allow for us to have greater access.
Right.
Could you real quick speak to the whole thing about, although it may be legal, there's still some laws that are in place. Like, yes, it's legal to buy alcohol, but you can't be behind the wheel drunk off alcohol. Right. So how does that translate to marijuana?
Kyle, that's exactly the same analogy you should use with this, that you cannot be under the influence and drive. And so, the same things that you do, children can't use marijuana legally. You have to be 21 and older.
21 is the age.
21 is the age. Also, you have to know your provisions of where you live. Landlords may say, just like we have smoke-free places, you cannot smoke here. Employers, even though it will be legal, can still say, we want this to be a place where you cannot be under the influence. So they may still be able to test you. So what I would say to folks is, check with your employers, check with your landlords, and follow the law. The law will be just like alcohol, you cannot consume and drive. You will still be subjected to the DUI statute if you do that.
Okay.
So, Kim, before you go, because it's our first time really having you in the studio since all that's happened this year.
Yeah.
And everybody in Chicago knows, if you watch the news, listen to the show, your job had a big job this year.
Yeah.
I know you're probably over the name Jussie Smollett, but I just want to know, I think I read there was an investigation going on.
Yeah.
Is that true, or are we past the Jussie Smollett? What's happening with that right now?
Jussie Smollett.
Right.
According to Dave Chappelle.
Yes, that's right.
Did you watch that?
I did watch it. I found the last 12 minutes to be quite humorous. There is Dan Webb has been appointed to investigate our office's handling of the case. We have said from the very beginning that we are open and transparent to a non-political view of this. But what I've said before this even started, when we've been on here before, our office is committed to fighting violent crime. And for people who are accused of nonviolent offenses without a criminal background, our default has been, if we can deal with that outside of the criminal justice system, that's what we're going to do. That when we have a city that is battling gun violence at the rate that we're seeing it, when we have a city that's dealing, with young people scared to go outside, our resources and attention should be focused on that. And there are people who will annoy us and aggravate us and do the things that we will scratch our heads forever. But I don't know that necessarily has to be dealt with in our criminal justice system. And so we'll take the investigation as it comes. We will fully cooperate. But I stand by our office's position that people with nonviolent offenses without a criminal background should default not be in our justice system.
Well said.
And if you need help, we got your back.
My law partner, I've been waiting for him to step. He's so busy now.
Yeah, because I've really been researching this marijuana thing. I want to make sure I got all the bases covered.
Yeah. So just at least have the basic January 1st.
Yeah, there you go. But right now, product sampling and testing.
Quality control. I got you.
Yes.
All right. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. If people want to find out more about the Clear My Record program, where can they go?
They can go to our website, Cook County State's Attorney, all one word, .org.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. We
Thank
enjoyed
you,
Thank you.
Looking
Kim Foxx in the
beautiful.
studio.
Got that good hair going on, juices and berries. Okay, Kim.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
It's GCI.
Thank you.